From the data that we heard yesterday, we're hitting just the tip of the iceberg because the problem isn't isolated to drugs. It benefits small numbers of patients. Abbott Pharmaceuticals increased the price of Norvir, a drug used to treat AIDS. The drug was often used by other companies as an ingredient in their drug therapies. In 2003, Abbott jacked up the price for Norvir by 500%. This was done at the same time that Abbott began marketing their new product, Kaletra, another AIDS pharmaceutical drug that included Norvir and served as a replacement for the competition's drug therapy. The result forced patients and providers to turn to Abbott's Kaletra instead of the formerly cost-effective alternative that used Norvir and competitors' drugs. Previously undisclosed documents and emails reviewed by the Wall Street Journal in 2007 showed that Abbott's leadership actively considered ways to promote Kaletra over Norvir. And as you can see by this bar graph we have of the price increase of Norvir, you see before the change was made, $257.18, and then up to $1,285.89. This is an egregious increase. Another example. The next chart shows just a few examples of enormous price increases that we've seen. Mustagen, which is used to treat rare cancers, had a 1,000% increase. 1,000% increase for Mustagen. You see Cosmogen, which treats kidney disease. That had a 3,500% increase. And you can see the names of the companies here: Abbott, Ovation, Questcor, Ovation, Sigma-Tau. And you can see what the prices were before. Here's Cosmogen at $16.79. It goes up after the sale, $593.75, 3,436% increase in the drug price. Look at what we've seen with Madeline. Now, Madeline goes nearly off the charts. Look at this. This is used to treat rare Hodgkin's lymphoma, and we see an increase of 7,999%. That's an 8,000% increase. What is this? Well, to me, I'm not an economist, but to me this looks like simple price gouging. And it's not only hurts the hospitals that have to purchase these expensive drugs, but also the patients who rely on them. An elderly woman from Park Rapids, Minnesota, who suffers from cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, was forced to pay over $8,000 in out-of-pocket expenses for Mustagen, the drug I just recently discussed, which was sold by Ovation Pharmaceuticals, whose single-dose price increased from around $50 to nearly $550 after the company acquired the rights to the drug. What is the solution? In America, we have a serious problem with healthcare inflation and runaway costs. That's not a surprise to anyone. It's no wonder. When we have pharmaceutical companies like Ovation or Questcor increasing prices to astronomical price levels because of the lack of competition in the market, their actions are able to exploit an extremely vulnerable and captive market. And it's not like the pharmaceutical industry is withering at the vine. You can see that pharmaceutical companies earn higher profits than other Fortune 500 companies. Here you have profits of other Fortune 500 companies, because these are huge companies. And then you look at the pharmaceutical profits and what we've seen over time, when they're always significantly ahead of other Fortune 500 companies. Now, I wanted to mention the Orphan Drug Act, because this is timely for what we're talking about of the treatment of these rare diseases. The Orphan Drug Act was passed in 1983 to provide incentives to drug companies to develop innovative drugs for rare diseases, because without incentives, drug companies may never be able to recoup research and development costs in niche markets. What we've seen, however, is that at least a handful of drug companies have used this status of orphan drugs to keep increasing costs well beyond the cost of research, development, and manufacturing. These staggeringly high prices, in turn, threaten the financial security of middle-class families relying on these drugs. Where generic drugs have helped lower the cost of many prescription drugs on the market, generic competition is also less likely to occur for orphan drugs. According to a study published in the Rand Journal of Economics, the market size for a drug has to be about $32 million, that's $2,007 adjusted for inflation, to ensure entry of a generic into the market. When we're talking about drugs that have been around for decades, like indomethacin, to treat patient populations of only a few thousand, there is often just not enough of an incentive for the generic drug to enter the market. Beyond hospitals and patients, a dramatic, unforeseeable increase in price for one of these drugs has a significant impact on the federal government. Medicare, Medicaid, you look at what's going on. I know that Representative Waxman in the House held a hearing showing what's going on with the pricing of these pharmaceuticals across the board. I have asked, Mr. President, the Federal Trade Commission to initiate an investigation into any potential anti-competitive conduct or consequence arising out of Ovation's market actions and dominance in the area of non-surgical treatments for PDA. We need to ensure that the FTC continues to conduct these crucial investigations to guarantee competition, keeping costs low for consumers, and encouraging innovations. That's one drug that's coming out of my state, the state of Minnesota, because some doctors had the foresight to see that this was outrageous and figure out that one company owned both of the drugs that were competing with each other. But it is disturbing that our providers, hospitals, and patients are being blindsided by these exorbitant price increases. Our federal government should be able to track these trends in pharmaceutical pricing. If we start to monitor this data, there is more of a paper trail, giving us enhanced ability to do something about these companies' practices. You know, I favor reimportation of drugs from Canada. I favor negotiating under Medicare Part D to save our seniors some money. All of these things must be on the table as we approach health care reform in the next year. But when provided with the right information on drug prices, especially in smaller markets, doctors can be alerted of big price increases, potentially spurring generic alternatives to expensive drugs, and giving the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid the tools and information to better track pricing in this market. To start looking at this information, I am in the process of working with the GAO to look into the issue of drug pricing and these enormous increases. Finally, I intend to investigate whether the FDA can fast-track approval for generic drugs that would be just as safe and effective, but much less expensive, creating competition in markets with dramatic price increases. I understand, Mr. President, that we have a market-based economy. It's fine for companies to make money on the products they sell. They should. But when we're dealing with the well-being of sick patients, babies and the elderly and everyone in between, we know that something's wrong here. These companies can't be allowed to make money off the backs of little babies that have holes in their hearts. I hope yesterday's hearing is a starting point for addressing the problems that accompany such enormous price increases, problems that have been plaguing our doctors, our insurance companies, our Medicare and Medicaid programs, and most importantly, our patients for far too long. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.